ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 25, the characteristics of King Puranjan. So we are in the story Narad Muni has described what is the city of 9 gates, Navadvarapuri is, and how the city is fortified by different things there. So we are at text 18:1-8. हिम निर्जर परमस्मात् कुसुमाकर वायुना चलत्प्रावल विपटन् नलिनी तटसम्पदि. Translation.
The branches of the trees standing on the bank of the lake received particles of water carried by the spring air from the falls coming down from the icy mountain. Purport. In this verse, the word Hima Nirjara is particularly significant. The waterfall represents a kind of liquid humor or rasa, that is a relationship. In the body, there are different types of humor, rasa or melo. The supreme melo, that is a relationship, is called the sensual melo, adi rasa. When this adi rasa or sensual desire comes in contact with the spring air, moved by Cupid, it becomes agitated. In other words, all these are representations of rupa, rasa, gandha, shabda, and sparsha. The wind is sparsha or touch. The waterfall is rasa or taste. The spring air, kusumakara, is smell. All these varieties of enjoyment make life very pleasing, and thus we become captivated by material existence. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So now there are different rasas that are being mentioned, and Himanarichala, this is the waterfall representing the liquid humor or rasa, mellow. So there is actually no specific word in English to describe the word rasa, but rasa means a typical rasa one derives in that relationship that is called as a mellow. Like very simple example, when you touch the feet of your mother, you have a different feeling. When you touch the feet of your teacher, is a different feeling. Okay, so activity may be same, but the feelings are different because rasa is different. Correct. So this is how the rasa is different, and there are different rasa. The adi rasa is the devotee's relationship with the supreme lord, which is prema, and in the material world, the prema is reflected as kama, the sensual desire, and which is at the top in the spiritual world because the material world is the reflection. Urdhvamula madashakam ashwatham prahuravayam. The top fruit on the real tree is reflected as the most bottom fruit on the reflected tree of the material existence. But these are the rasas which make the life very pleasing and enjoying. And by the material enjoyment, the Puranjan is going to be captivated within the city of nine gates. Text 19. Nana नानारण्यमृगा व्रतैर् आरा आराधते मुनिव्रतैः आहुतं मन्यते पान्थो यत्र कोकिलकूजितैः. Translation.
Translation. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by that atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. Purport. A peaceful family with wife and children is compared to the peaceful atmosphere of the forest. Children are compared to non-violent animals. Sometimes, however, wives and children are called Swajanakaya Dasayu, burglars in the name of kinsmen. A man earns his livelihood with hard labor, but the result is that he is plundered by his wife and children, exactly as a person in a forest is attacked by some thieves and burglars who take his money. Nonetheless, in family life, the turmoil of wife and children appears to be like the cooing of the cuckoos in the garden of the family life. Being invited by such an atmosphere, the person who is passing through such a blissful family life desires to have his family with him at all costs. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious like the great sages. Right. And then there is cooing of the cuckoos, and the passengers along the path were invited by the atmosphere to take rest in that garden. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains how the peaceful family with wife and children is compared to the peaceful atmosphere of the forest. So this is very, very important, having the peace at home. In fact, we have seen the stability at home is extremely important for so many things. What is the reason why NRIs, the first generation NRI and the second generation, they do extremely well abroad, right? By the third generation, they just become resident Americans because they go with Indian samskaras and they have American facilities or European facilities. And this is like Prabhupada always talked about the blind man and the lame man. That is the deadly combo. So why Indians do well is because of the stability at home. This is very important thing because of the stability at home. Recently, I was hearing one very important lecture by Gaurang Prabhu where he says that in 80s and 90s, after the departure of Srila Prabhupada, within ISKCON there was so much of a turmoil. And when there is so much of turmoil in an organization or in an institution, what happens is that the next generation, there was no leadership generated from the devotees who came within 80s and 90s, very rarely. Later, when stable the atmosphere was provided within ISKCON, then there is the flourishing leadership. So the stable family life, we owe a lot to our parents for giving a stable family life, and this is our responsibility as well. Otherwise, it becomes the Dasyuraj Kuleshu cha. The Kali Yuga family is explained as Dampatya Abhiruchir Hetu. Otherwise, it becomes the turmoil of wife and children, that is being explained here. Again, Bhagavatam, the basic thread of Bhagavatam is Vairagya. So, a lot of hitting points will be there in Bhagavatam. And because the sages were boys means male, and if there is a description otherwise, it is boy for, it is. So, let us take it in that right spirit. Okay. So the most important point here is stability at home. We have seen devotees, those devotees who come from a very stable family background, they remain good devotees. The people who come from very stable family background remain good brahmacharis. This is one of the reasons why ISKCON has very few brahmacharis abroad compared to India. Correct. So stable family life is extremely important. Text 20. Yadruchayagatam tatra dadarsha pramadottamam भृत्यदर्शैर् दर्शैर्भिरायान्तेर् एकैषैकतनायकैः. Translation.
While wandering here and there in that wonderful garden, King Puranjana suddenly came in contact with a very beautiful woman who was walking there without any engagement. She had 10 servants with her, and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying him. Purport. The body has already been compared to a beautiful garden. During youth, the sensual impulse is awakened, and the intelligence according to one's imagination is prone to contact the opposite sex. In youth, a man or woman is in search of the opposite sex by intelligence or imagination, if not directly. The intelligence influences the mind, and the mind controls the 10 senses. 5 of these senses gather knowledge, and 5 work directly. Each sense has many desires to be fulfilled. This is the position of the body and the owner of the body, Ranjan, who is within the body.
So when the king was wandering here and there in that wonderful garden, which is the garden of the body, the king Puranjan suddenly came across a very beautiful woman walking without engagement, leisurely. Right. She had 10 servants with her, and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying them. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the Puranjan was wandering in the beautiful garden of the body, and during this, he came across the sensual impulse. And Prabhupada says, in youth, a man or woman is in search of opposite gender by intelligence or imagination. Intelligence or imagination? That means that one is, sometimes people imagine also, he is looking at me, she is looking at me, and all those, the movie line, Kaho Na Pyar Hai, and all those. And this is being, predicted in Srimad Bhagavatam. If not directly, correct. And the intelligence influences the mind, and mind controls the 10 senses. So the 10 servants are the 10 senses, and the servants having hundreds of wives is as each sense is having many desires to be fulfilled. So there are the 10 senses and many desires to be fulfilled through intelligence, and this is how Puranjan was attracted. So here, text 21. Panchashirshahina guptam pratiharena sarvatah anveshanam arshabham praudham kamarupinim. Translation.
A woman was protected on all sides by a five-hooded snake. She was very beautiful and young, and she appeared very anxious to find a suitable husband. Purpose. The vital force of a living entity includes the 5 kinds of air working within the body, which are known as prana, apana, dhyana, samana, and udana. The vital force is compared to a serpent because a serpent can live by simply drinking air. The vital force carried by the air is described as the pratihara, or the bodyguard. Without the vital force, one cannot live for a moment. Indeed, all the senses are working under the protection of the vital force. The woman who represents intelligence was searching after a husband. This indicates that intelligence cannot act without consciousness. A beautiful woman is useless unless protected by the proper husband. Intelligence must always be very clear. Therefore, the word of Praudham, very young, is used here. Material enjoyment means utilizing intelligence for the sake of rupa, rasa, gandha, shabda, and sparsha, or form, taste, smell, sound, and touch.
So the woman So the woman here is compared to the intelligence, right? The woman was protected by all sides by a five-hooded snake. She was very beautiful and young and very anxious to find a suitable husband. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the vital force of a living entity is literally tossed on this five prana, pancha prana, that is prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. So these are the vayu. So when we say kapha, vata, pitta, so vata means these are the pancha prana within the body, right? So many times people are unable to understand where is this is a very loose translation is bile, kapha, the vata, air, and pitta. So it's a very, very loose translation. It doesn't capture, just like dharma is translated as religion, which doesn't capture much of the dharma. Similarly, pancha prana is translated as five airs. It doesn't capture much of the pancha prana. But this is the five-hooded snake, and the vital force is compared to a serpent because a serpent can live by simply drinking air. Okay, so this is the vital. Therefore, it is pancha prana is compared to the snake. And without vital force, one cannot live for a moment. Therefore, it is prana. And this is very clear understanding. Prana chale gaye, matlab, we always say prana. The woman represents intelligence and she is searching for a husband. And Prabhupada says here that the beautiful woman has to be protected by a suitable husband, and similarly, husband has to be protected by a suitable wife. It is both. Right. This statement, husband is to be protected by wife, and that wife is called as Durga, will come in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam later. Text 22. Now here is a description of that intelligence or description of the woman which is moving in the garden. Sunasam sudatim balam sukapolam varananam samavinyanstakarnanam biphratim kundalashriyam. Translation.
The woman's nose, teeth, and forehead were all very beautiful. Her ears were equally very beautiful and were bedecked with dazzling earrings. Purport: the body of intelligence enjoys the objects of sense gratification that cover it, such as smell, vision, and hearing. The word sunasam, beautiful nose, indicates the organ for acquiring knowledge of smell. Similarly, the mouth is the instrument for acquiring knowledge by taste. By chewing an object and touching it with the tongue, we can understand its taste. The word sukapolam, nice forehead, indicates clear brain capable of understanding things as they are. By intelligence, one can set things in order. The earrings set upon the two ears are placed there by the work of intelligence. Thus, the ways of acquiring knowledge are described metaphorically.
Yeah. So the intelligence was fully equipped to take in Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, Shabda, and Sparsha. Form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. And thus it is Sunasa, Sukapolam, and all the senses intact and connected to the intelligence. So this is being explained here in an allegorical way. Text 23. Pishanganivim Sushronim Shama Kalakamechalam Padbhyam Kanakadvyamscha Chalanti Nupura Devatamiva. Translation.
The waist and hips of the woman were very beautiful. She was dressed in a yellow saree with a golden belt. While she walked, her ankle bells rang. She appeared exactly like a denizen of the heavens. Purport: this verse expresses the joyfulness of the mind upon seeing a woman with raised hips and breast dressed in an attractive saree bedecked with ornaments.
Yeah. So Puranjan, when he was wandering in the garden, suddenly he came across, and his mind became joyful. Right. So this is such an amazing thing. In one beautiful lecture, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says this very nice point. He says that whenever you come across a very beautiful object, here there is a description of a woman with very, the very well formed bodily limbs. One has two options. What are the options? Either to see it as Vishaya and for my enjoyment, or one can see it as Vaibhava for the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. Right. So it is such an amazing point. If we see Vishaya, then there will be contamination. If we see Vaibhava, then there is engagement in the service. Like when we see rose on the street, if I just pluck the rose, want to smell it, then it is Vishaya. When I pluck the rose and want to offer it in the service of the Lord, then it is Vaibhava. And most of the time, you don't have to do anything with the rose, right? Because it belongs to somebody else. But this point of Vishaya and Vaibhava is very important point. It is not for Vishaya, it is the Vaibhava of the Lord, which is to be, kept distance from based on Vaishnava etiquettes. Text 24. स्तनौ व्यजितकैशोरौ समवृत्तौ निरन्तरौ वस्त्रान्तेन निहूगन्ति व्रीडया गजगामिनीम्. Translation.
With the end
With
of
the
her
end of her
sari, the
sari,
woman was trying to cover her breasts, which were equally round and well placed side by side. She again and again tried to cover them out of shyness while she walked exactly like a great elephant. Purport. The two breasts represent attachment and envy. The symptoms of raga and dvesha, attachment and envy, are described in Bhagavad Gita 3.34. Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragade dveshau vyavasthitau tayorna vasham agachet tauhi asya paripanthi now. Attraction and repulsion for sense objects are felt by embodied beings. But one should not fall under the control of senses and sense objects because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. These representatives of attachment and envy are very much unfavorable for advancement in spiritual life. One should not be attracted by the breasts of young women. The great Saint Shankaracharya has described the breasts of women, especially young women, as nothing but a combination of muscles and blood. So one should not be attracted by the illusory energy of breasts with nipples. They are agents of Maya meant to victimize the opposite sex. Because the breasts are equally attractive, they are described as a sama vrittau. The sex impulse remains in an old man's heart also, even up to the point of death. To be rid of such agitation, one must be very much advanced in spiritual consciousness, like Yamunacharya, who said, Yad
Yeah,
avadhi.
yeah, I'll read this. यदवधि मम चेत कृष्णपदारविन्दे नवनवरसधाम्न्युद्यतं रन्तुमासीत् तद अवधिबत नारिसङ्गमे स्मर्युमाने भवन्ति मुखविकारसृष्टूनिष्ठीवनं च.
Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of such pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. When one is spiritually advanced, he can no longer be attracted by the lumps of flesh and blood, which are the breast of young women. The word Nirantara is significant because although the breasts are situated in different locations, the action is the same. We should not make any distinction between attachment and envy. As described in Bhagavad Gita 3.37, they are both products of Rajoguna. Kama esha Krodha esha Rajoguna Samudbhava. The word Niguhantim, trying to cover, indicates that even if one is tempted by kama, lobha, krodha, etc., they can be transfigured by Krishna consciousness. In other words, one can utilize kama, lust, by serving Krishna. Being impelled by lust, an ordinary worker will work hard day and night. Similarly, a devotee can work hard day and night to satisfy Krishna. Just as kamis are working hard to satisfy kama, krodha, a devotee should work in the same way to satisfy Krishna. Similarly, krodha, anger, can also be used in the service of Krishna when it is applied to the non-devotee demons. Hanumanji applied his anger in this way. He was a great devotee of Lord Ramchandra and he utilized his anger to set fire to the kingdom of Ravana, a non-devotee demon. Thus, Kama, lust, can be utilized to satisfy Krishna, and Krodha, anger, can be utilized to punish the demons. When both are used for Krishna's service, they lose their material significance and become spiritually important.
Then there is a description of the young woman Kaishori. When she was moving around, she was trying to cover herself very well, right? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that there is additional attachment and envy, which is raga and dvesha. This is what is compared to the two breasts, right? Raga and dvesha. Again, needless to say, this is a allegorical story, and it is spoken to Prachina Barhi by Narada Muni when Prachina Barhi is extremely old and to make him detached, right? This is not that you look at your wife with same eye, or not that you look in the mirror and have some other opinion about yourself. Correct. We have to understand the context, and we have to understand that whom is spoken to whom for what purpose. Right. And then there are learning with every context. There are learning in our lives as well. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes raga and dvesha, and how raga and dvesha are the stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. And then there are impulses, and especially the impulse of getting attracted to the opposite gender. And therefore, what it simply means is Vaishnav etiquettes. If we follow the Vaishnav etiquettes very well, then there is all these problems, and that's why the Indian culture and Vaishnav etiquettes, they have to be followed. Right. The base Indian culture that we have been taught by our parents, how they conducted themselves. Our parents conducted themselves right. They lived in the same material world. They also faced the same materials, the blocks, and much more harsher, the struggles than what we are struggling with. Then Srila Prabhupada quotes Yamunacharya. This is a very amazing prayer. Yamunacharya here is a sannyasi. Yamunacharya is a grandfather of our right. Yamunacharya is Yamunacharya, who the big story of Yamunacharya. So he says here, Yad avati mama cheta, this is very famous verse. Okay. Mama cheta Krishna padaravinde navanavaras dhaman udyadam rantumasit. Since when I'm engaged in the Krishna consciousness, navanavaras dhaman, that there are so many different rasas come to my mind, and I relish so much spiritual. Tad avadhi bata nari sangame smaryumane. But when there is a thought of nari sangame smaryumane, bhavanti mukha vikara srushto nishtivanam cha. My lips curl in distaste and I spit at the thought. Now there are important learnings from here. The first thing is that we should be engaged in spiritual activities. Right? We should be engaged in Varnashram activities very well. We should be engaged in spiritual activities very well. There is a new fad, amongst everybody and equally amongst devotees as well, to try to somehow do one's material activities and try to work less and get lot of money so that one can become full-time as early as possible. And it has never worked anywhere. Okay. So one has to go through Varnashram very well. I know one devotee, very close friend of mine. He worked very well, almost 15-20 years, Europe, America, amassed good wealth, came back, retired, and he became full-time. And because he could not get a service to his liking, the freedom in the service to his liking, then he was like tired of being full-time, and again joined back job. He said that I'm not doing job for money, frankly. I'm doing job for a proper engagement. So the sense of Varnashram engagement and contribution is very important, and one should not preemptively give up one's job thinking only that I have sufficient money. Right. So that is not the point. Retirement, money is only one part of retirement. Very solid engagement, which is according to one's psychophysical nature is very important. I'll give a classic example. In our Pune, we have a devotee, Tulsi Prabhu, amazing devotee. So, he is always into academics. He's always into education, and he did all his services in the realm of education. He came up with BMS, and very wonderfully he's doing BMS. So his seva and psychophysical nature are greatly in sync with each other, right? So when you have a powerful service which can engage you very well, then one can think of being full time apart from financial stability, right? So, one thing is one has to be engaged. One has to be engaged in varnashram duties very well, and one has to be engaged in the spiritual activities very well. Second, and Prabhupada quotes there, the later part of the verse, Kama Krishna Karmarpani, Krodha Bhakta Dvesha Jane. So this is how Raga and Dvesha can be, this is how the Raga and Dvesha can be engaged in the service of the Lord. So, and there is an example of Arjuna, Hanumanji, they engaging there, Raga and Dvesha. There is a example of gopis, they are engaging, the sense of Kama in the service of the Lord. Then even such a personality as Yamunacharya at times may get a thought of which is a very otherwise thought, a dirty thought, because Yamunacharya is a sannyasi, celebrated sannyasi. So the thoughts coming to mind, may come because of of course, and here he is writing this prayer out of his own humility. Yamunacharya is a very, very great personality. But the thought may come, but what is important is how we react to the thought. Right. And needless to say, Yamunacharya is a sannyasi there. Right. So this is how one has to deal with kama and dvesha, raga and dvesha, attachment and envy. And Prabhupada concludes this, that kama can be utilized to satisfy Krishna and krodha also can be utilized to punish the demon. Kama Krishna karmarpani, krodha bhakta dvesha jane. And both when they are used in Krishna's service, they lose their material significance and become spiritually important, right? So what this means is our conditioning can become our strength. Very powerful lesson there. Our conditioning doesn't remain limiting. Arjuna should not say my nature is Kshatriya, I'm supposed to fight, kill, blood, war, and what kind of my nature it is. Better to have a nature like Brahmana, who is simply ringing the bell and in front of the Archa Vigraha of the Lord and doing seva of the Lord. And what he is doing, gumoing in agarbatti and arti, pancharti, chamar, and bell in the hand, and he's standing always in the altar. Apparently, whose position is better? Of course, the Brahmana who is doing that activity. But our conditioning can become our greatest asset when it is used in the service of the Supreme Lord. So this is what Srila Prabhupada concludes here. So we'll conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai,
Jai.
Gaura Bhakta ki jai. Thank you,
Jai.
Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Small question.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
There is a small announcement. We have Tapan Prabhu, who is the backbone devotee of this morning reading program. And his mother is being operated for cancer. So operation is ongoing. 7 o'clock it started. So we'll just chant 3 times Hare Krishna Mahamantra as a prayer, so that operation goes very well and the speedy recovery of his mother. Hare Krishna. We'll chant together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare
Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, this Puranjan story, you said it's allegorical story. That means it actually doesn't exist. But to explain Prachinabari, he took example of that because he was at some point of time he was full of sense gratification. Is that my understanding correct?
In a way, Puranjan story is allegorical story which actually doesn't exist, but it exists in every living entity. Who is Puranjan?
Ourselves.
Jiva is the Puranjan, right? So now it is the expertise of Narada Muni that he is such an old person and such a veteran king he is. And therefore, Narada Muni is not directly saying that sit down and listen, take my 6 session course on Bhagavad Gita. Narada Muni is telling the story thoda very indirectly, beating around the bush is coming to the point. But Bhagavatam is also very skillfully telling the same story to all living entities, right? So yes, it is allegorical. At the same time, it is happening in everybody's life. It has happened in everybody's life millions of times. Correct?
Yeah. My question was Puranjana itself doesn't never existed in the historical, like we have Prachina Barhi or Prachetas like that, right?
Yeah. Puranjan never, in a sense, yeah, it's allegorical story. It's Bhagavatam clearly says it's allegorical story.
Thank you. You also said we can utilize Kama and Krodha, whatever our conditioning, in the service of the Lord.
Right.
Sometimes we don't know how to utilize it. I mean, we know some conditioning, we do have conditioning, and some we know, some we don't know our conditionings. So first thing is finding out our conditioning is one point. Second thing is how to convert that into service is another point. So
Yeah, and that's
how
why
do
we
we?
need a senior association. That's why we need counselor, facilitator, right?
Yes, Professor.
You are very senior devotee yourself, but the point is, you know, and we should know what we can do and what we cannot do. That is also very important. Just like we are not like Hanumanji or Arjuna. They are very special, empowered personality. At times, they were also confused. Correct. So
Yes.
we need guidance. What that means is we need guidance. Everybody have to be guided in our spiritual activities. Correct?
Yes. So these 2 points we can only identify in the association or in the like kind of like when the senior devotee observes in our behavior and can share, right? Is that my understanding correct?
Yeah. So again, the sharing is not with the only senior, the senior who knows us very well. And one has to be also careful that again, all this after 7:45, all this is extremely optional. We are not going late in the class, but it is very, very optional to stay back. So please don't stay back. I mean, our class is over at 7:45 always. It's a way morning, and morning is very difficult. So anyway, we'll just conclude in a minute. So it is not, see, there are two things. One thing is absolutely not sharing, and another thing is sharing in such a way that everybody in ISKCON knows about my conditioning. Both are reckless. Sometimes people feel that, I have to be honest, Prabhuji. That is called as reckless honesty. And they will tell that, Prabhu, I am so fallen. Everybody they will tell. And if you put it on internet and everything, internet never forgives. After 25 years also, your statement will be quoted by somebody to someone. So honesty means you have to find out really a senior who knows us very well and to reveal to him in a balanced manner. Once one devotee was saying that Maharaj, very fallen. So Maharaj asked Radhisham Prabhu, what happened? And then Radhisham Prabhu said, no, Maharaj, he has that humility where he always prays to, whenever he would always ask the blessings in this way only, that I'm very fallen. I mean, we have to just be human and normal, right? We cannot imitate or we cannot imitate the very characters as they are. There is a time, place, circumstance. There is understanding of what's happening. Another extreme is not to reveal anything to anyone. That is another bad extreme. So it has to be a balance between the two. Right? Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.